Welcome to all. When we think of rights, we may think about human rights. Do we have the understanding that children also have rights? In this topic, we are going to discuss about understanding child rights. For our discussion, we have with us our distinguished experts, Dr. Lada Ramohan and Dr. Deepthi Srivastava. Welcome to both of you to this session. Let I introduce our distinguished guest, Dr. Lada Ramohan, presently Chief Consultant for Samagra Shiksha Scheme at Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Education. Her career span extends for more than 3 decades. She served as Assistant Professor and Associate Professor in GGSIPU affiliated colleges and as guest faculty at Jamia Millia Islamia. She worked as an academic coordinator, Rainbow Hope Center for Equity Studies, also associated at Center for Early Childhood Development, Ambedkar University, recipient of Adarsh Vidyalaya Award for her contribution in research. She has many publications to her credit, including 3 books and various international and national research papers, and contributed several units for IGNO's study material. She is also participated as a member in the member of NCF committee and in the implementation of NEP 2020 task by several states, actively involved in policy matters with respect to School of Education. Welcome, ma'am. And coming to Dr. Deepthi Srivastava, she did her doctoral research on children's negotiation of difference and building a culturally responsive education for the disadvantaged children. She worked in several NGOs before being closely involved with the Center for Equity Studies and its Rainbow Homes program. She was a university teaching assistant at CIE, Delhi University for 4 years. She worked as an assistant professor at a B.Ed college affiliated to GGSIPU. With Ignas Pahal, she is the research lead. She has been involved in statewide projects in Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan in teacher professional development. She was part of the team that made Adarshila a foundational learning teacher manual for SSAUP. She has conducted large-scale research and looked at the systemic approach to capacity building of teachers. Recently, she was involved in developing test items for FLN NAS 2021. Welcome, ma'am, to this session. In this video, we will discuss child rights perspective in the cultural context of India, various rights of the child, role and importance of major institutions in protection of child rights, and role of teacher in protecting child rights. After watching this video, you should be able to describe child rights as subset of human rights, enumerate the rights of children, develop understanding about the challenges faced by children as a vulnerable group, analyze the implications of RT Act 2009, identify the national institutions that ensure safety and protection of child rights, appreciate the role of civil society in securing rights of the children who face exploitation, and reflect upon the role of teacher in the discourse of child rights. Okay, over to the topic, understanding child rights. And we know that when we tell about the child rights, do we as teachers or parents are aware about that child rights is a subset of human rights? And in this context, Dr. Lada, could you please explain that how do you perceive child rights as a subset of human rights?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth, for bringing up this important topic of child rights. Now, it's very interesting to know how child right became a subset of human right. Earlier, as human being, it was a big ambit covering everybody. There was, even a child was included as just as a human being with no special focus on its needs. But the United due to the aftermath of World War and loss and abuse and violence against children, new forms were made, and the United Nations set up human rights, and it contained 9 treaties, out of which the rights of child became one of the treaties. Now, child rights is now become a part of human right, and the convention of UN it declared this as an important right among the 9 treaties. Now, there are different organizations and legislation working on this, like in Geneva Convention also this was taken up, ILO also it was taken up, but the main the job was entrusted with UNICEF. Later, many countries ratified this, and now it has become a part of the human right. So, in the Geneva Declaration in 1959 and UNCRC, that is in 89, it decided to give full status and importance to children, and the basic principles introduced in this, it emphasized that the child has to be looked at with something with dignity. They need care. Their needs have to be understood and protected, and there have been successful progress, and each nation also has adopted many policies for protecting the child.
Okay. So, you have stated about how child rights can be perceived as a subset of human rights. And when we look at the several acts, we know that there are many acts which are related to the protection of children. Still, their problems are not specifically addressed, and children continue to be the vulnerable group in society. Can you enumerate the challenges faced by children? Dr. Deepthi, could you please explain about some of the challenges?
Yes, as you rightly pointed out, that India has indeed come a long way in, first of all, establishing laws, enactment of laws for the security, protection and well-being of children. But there still exist gaps. Gaps at a first level is between the interconnection of these various acts in networking among these vulnerable groups of children who need security and protection. Now, vulnerable groups are identified because India has done work on that front, but this population keeps growing and also intermeshing with other vulnerable groups. Now, what are these groups that we are talking about? We are talking about children living in poverty and resultant undernutrition. India ranks 94 among 107 nations in the Global Hunger Index report recently. We have children on the streets and homeless children which are not enumerated in a proper way till date, because the census figures and the figures given by UNICEF surveys and other organizations that work on child rights have different numbers. So there is a lack of enumeration in that sense. Then we have children in the informal labor at shops, in homes. So at shops, in restaurants are still easy to identify, but within homes is very difficult. And the census of India 2011 portrays it at 3.9 of the population of children in India we have. There is another vulnerable group which is children who are married early. Yes. As per NHFS data, we have about 24 million such children. Then there is this group of children in prostitution, children who are abused, children in conflict with law, and children suffering domestic violence. So this whole group is vulnerable and gets marginalized and not looked at from the legal framework, because those interventions of people to go into and to recognize them and bring them in is a tough challenge. And mainstream them is a tough challenge. What are the kind of challenges they face? First of all, basic needs like food and shelter is inaccessible. Parental care is not there at all. Dignity is compromised. They have fraught identities, because for these children, even when identified and put into schools and all that, they take a long time to really come to terms with talking to other people and come to terms with their own identities. They suffer anxiety, fear and depression more than the others. And talking of health, they suffer ill health. In a study that I was engaged with Save the Children, we had looked at children living on the streets, and there the children told us that they suffer diarrhea for over 2 months at a stretch. And therein they do not have access to medicines such as to control diarrhea. And then they do not have access to food which can be healthy during these times. Such is the challenge faced by children.
Access to education also.
Absolutely.
Because
True.
They are not having access to education or access to medical facilities.
Right. True.
Okay, so Dr. Deepthi has elaborated the challenges and the difficulties the children are passing through. And when we look at the child rights, this perspective, how we can perceive in the context of Indian cultural setup. Could you please elaborate, Dr. Lata?
Yeah. So, as we all know, India has a huge population, and most of it, I think 52%, if I am not mistaken, comprises of children. And our country is a country of diversity of caste, creed, color, language. And the main issue with the children we are talking about, already Dr. Deepthi has enumerated the vulnerable group. They have many issues, and the main right which they need is the right to parental care. Now lakhs and lakhs of children are there who are denied this parental care. You may wonder why. The reasons is mostly engaging because of war or because of natural disasters. They have to migrate and they lose their parent, and due to diseases they lose, especially now we know in the pandemic also it has been a tremendous loss for children who are orphaned. And then they poverty is a very important cause for this, that they don't get the care that parents should give. Parents have the immense responsibility of providing care, and these children are denied that access to parental care. Then the disability and gender discrimination also. Some girls are orphaned, and infanticides also we hear. So all these cause these children to suffer, and they lack the parental care, which is a very important right that we as Indians consider. Then the next we talk about right again, economic exploitation. How does it happen? Again, poverty, illiteracy of parents. They do not know the value of education, that they should send their children further for education. Then the parents or the fathers engage in wars and they are away, and the ladies have to run the house, and they feel that they should use their children for this. And we have been trying, government is trying maximum to provide access to at least primary education, but still most of them, they are irregular to school because they are engaged in child labor, because they feel that they will get something out of it. Then the right of protection against sexual abuse and exploitation, especially the children on the streets, they are mostly abused. And again, poverty, disability, unemployment, lack of knowledge where they should go to. All this causes, the neglect, the natural disasters, all this are a cause where they are sexually abused and there is exploitation which is rampant. So, I would like to share one of my experiences in the Rainbow Home, where we had provision for children under 18, especially girls. Girls were brought from, streets, and they were given education and care and nutrition there. But what happens is that these girls, no matter whatever we provide, their tendency is to go back to their old ways and they want to be back in the street. There was one incident where we tried to, give a good education in a private school for a child who was showing, very good academic, inclination. With great difficulty, we got admission in a private school in Delhi. But what happened that after 2 months, the girl decided not to continue schooling and she went back to her old ways. So, this is what, when they are not even aware of the benefits of education, because they are the first, in the family to go to school, the parents are illiterate, the poverty, the misery, all this, drive them to the streets, and where they are, abused and exploited to a great deal. Ministry of Women and Child, they have brought up this POSCO Act, which is very, very, very useful for protecting the rights of the child. It is for the protection of children from sexual offences, and I am told that if the child is abused and if the culprit is caught, till he is found free, he will be put in prison, even if it takes 10 years, I believe. So, very, very stringent rules are there. But of course, what is lacking in our system is that proper counseling for the children as well as to the family, this which is very, very important in today's time. And of course, we have many stringent rules like trafficking of child for, sexual purposes, a punishable act. Corporal punishment is banned. So we have come up with very, very many important rights for protecting our children. And of course, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is a flagship of our ministry for providing education for children from 6 to 14 years of age. We have come a long way, but still miles to go, I must say, in this.
Yes, surely. Dr. Lada has narrated the story of a girl, how their efforts are becoming successful, or again how the child is again forced to go back to the earlier context. When we look at the role of many national institutions, we can say that it stood for the safety and protection of child rights. But whether the public or the teachers and parents are aware about the existence of such national institutions. Could you please elaborate on the national institutions that stood for the safety and protection of child rights? Dr. Deepthi?
So, yes, continuing with the example that Dr. Lata just mentioned, because that has kind of shaken us to see that even when you're trying to put in children from the streets back into schools, how they tend to move back into the spaces from where they came from, which is why for many years and till now, child rights activists strongly say that every child out of school is a child labor. No, and that was sort of very strongly put, and which is why the Right to Education Act 2009 was also brought in. So important here is to consider that how is every child to be brought back into the ambit of safety and protection. It is the duty of the state how to do this. So, at the national level, there are three organizations majorly entrusted with this responsibility. This one is the NCPCR, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, the Ministry of Women and Child Development, and the Ministry of Education, which is MHRD. Now, why these three? Because one is duty of the state to ensure safety and protection of the child, to ensure nutrition and health of the child, and to ensure that the child is in school and is enjoying childhood, having a space which is safe, and also learning to overturn this cycle of poverty or lack of dignity per se. So, what does NCPCR do? It ensures that all laws, programs, policies, and administrative mechanisms are in accordance with the constitutional provisions of the UNCRC, the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child. The Ministry of Women and Child Development ensures development, care, and protection of the children through cross-cutting policies and programs like spreading awareness about their rights, facilitating access to nutrition, institutional and legislative support, as well as to schooling so that they can grow and develop to their full potential. The Education Ministry takes on the responsibility of enrolling children in government schools by providing free and compulsory education. Children do not need any kind of certificate or Aadhaar cards to get enrolled. They can be admitted at any time of the year, and they are provided social security benefits like scholarships and free bags and books and the midday meal, very crucial, so that their nutrition, their growth is supported.
Yes, surely we can see that the role of several national institutions. More than that, the government has passed the RT Act 2009. What arguments were made to advocate for free and compulsory education under RT Act 2009 in our country? And what does the term free and compulsory mean? Dr. Lata, could you please?
Yes, RTE Act is that is right to education is one of the most important rights providing free education to children, and the free, when we see the term free here means that the child is not obliged to pay anything, whether directly or indirectly. By directly we mean tuition fee, and indirectly like paying for uniform, paying for transport, paying for meal or midday meal as you mentioned earlier. So the child is not under any obligation to pay for this. Now when we look at the term compulsory, it means that the obligation of the government to provide education, at least primary education, from the age of 6 to 14, and the child should have free access to education and the right to complete education. So these are the two key terms, and as I mentioned earlier also, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is one of the important major flagship of our Ministry of HRD, and due to this implementation of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, we have seen enormous changes in the education landscape of our country. Our GER has improved very much, and that ratio, the ratio of children who are in the school, who have provided education has improved tremendously. The same with the ratio of girls now who have been given an opportunity to study has increased, and many programs and schemes have been taken by the government, and now we have the Samagra Shiksha. Again, the major intervention under under Samagra Shiksha is the implementation of the RTE Act, wherein we provide free uniforms, for children up to class 8. We provide free textbook. We provide transport facilities and midday meal. And we have many other facilities for the per se equity, for inclusion of children, all covered under this act. And I must say repeatedly, is one of the major reforms for protection of the child.
Yes, we have seen how RTA Act stood for the protection of child rights. And we should be aware about the rights that are provided through this act and by the government and other national institutions. Civil society plays a major role in securing rights to children who face various forms of exploitation. Can you give a few examples, Dr. Deepthi?
Yeah, sure. Yes, civil society has been tremendously important in securing rights of the children since a long time and many years. Civil society organizations have been working in prevention, in raising awareness, in providing support, as well as in mobilization, so that the governments listen, so that legislations happen. So there are three major areas in which civil society organizations work. One is they work towards elimination of child labor. How do they do this? There is awareness by either performing raids themselves in consonance with the government, of course, so that exploiters can be identified and stopped. They also network with individuals and to build partnerships so that exploitation does not happen. They build partnerships at the local community level. They provide basic services to people who need it most. The second area in which civil society organizations work is in education and enrollment. Here, as we were discussing before, that families are not aware of the importance of education. So herein civil society organizations come a big way in emphasizing importance of education, in helping in establishing safe and secure schools. They push for inclusive learning environment. They mobilize for financial outlays because that is very important when it comes to establishing and generating funds for libraries, for sports equipment, and getting children back to school. Civil society organizations also work a lot towards rehabilitation and relief. Like in the recent times, we've seen climatic changes and COVID has brought with it a lot of difficulty upon the most disadvantaged. So they work for providing access to food and shelter during disasters. They do relief work. They raise awareness on nutrition and health care also. They work closely with ICDS, which is with the Ministry of Women and Child Development, and Health and Family Welfare, and the Panchayati Raj institutions at the most decentralized level to make this happen.
Yes, truly. We can see that the role of civil society is coming up in many aspects, especially in the case of child rights. And in this discourse of child rights, could you please explain the role of teacher, Dr. Lina?
Yeah, sure. A child cannot be viewed in isolation. Both the family as well as school, they have significant influence on the growing child. And when we talk of the role of the teacher is the focal agent, I must say, because most of the part of the day the child is in school interacting with the teacher, with the peer group, and the teacher is always there with the child. So that part, therefore, her role becomes more and more important. Her interrelationship with the child can help, in understanding what the rights are and spreading awareness, etc. So the first thing I must say is that as a teacher, you must know what is a child, and then what are the rights associated with the child, what are the schemes available. For example, if a child has a problem, there is abuse and the teacher is witness to it, immediately she can take action and the right mechanisms how to go about it. A teacher's main job, I must say, is to understand this. She as an instructor, she will always be doing. Her job is not just curriculum transaction. She should have a major understanding about all these aspects. Then we come about the awareness. She can take part in many trainings. She can engage in workshops to understand more and more and learn about the child right. And we can give many tips for the teacher. Like she has to be a very patient listener. She has to be an observer, and she don't get just go on free counseling. She should know when and what to say. And as Deepthi had already said, school-home partnership is very important, and connect with the community. What's happening there? All this and the background that the child comes from. These are all very important for the teacher.
Yes.
Then as the teacher interacts and engages with the child, she would know if the child has any difficulty, and establishing rapport with the child will enable the child to come forward. If there is a problem, she can address.
Yes. So you have listened how the role of teacher is very much important in the discourse of child rights. And we have also seen how the school, home and community partnership is coming up in the case of child rights. So child rights are a subset of human rights. There are both international and national organizations who advocate for child rights, and civil society to play an important role in protection of child rights. And we can see that teachers act as focal agents for ensuring the rights of children. Hence, we can state that it is our collective responsibility to strive and ensure the rights of children, to protect them from child labor, sexual abuse, and other forms of exploitation.